Is going live. On Facebook, where is it streaming to? Is it streaming to your page or?
No, it's streaming to the podcast page. I'm going to share it to your timeline. Hang on.
Oh, I'm there.
You got it?
Yeah, I see myself in your live stream. Whoa.
All right. There's my live stream. Can I share it though? There we go. Come on. I don't want to share in a group. I want to share on my own timeline. But that's not what I want to do. It's kind of funky, the sharing on this. Once I should have shared it directly to my own timeline. I don't know why I did this to myself. I knew this would happen. It's happening now. Well,
I'm sharing it to my timeline. Neil,
can you share it?
I'm hosting a watch party on my timeline.
Okay. Okay, that's what I'm doing.
There's a significant lag too.
Yeah, it's always weird. I can't watch
I'm hosting a watch party on my timeline.
Okay, I'm killing the sound on mine because I don't want to hear all this. All right, we are officially live. Is anybody watching yet though?
Yeah, so there's a number of folks that have joined in, and we do have, between Greg and you and I talking right now, there's a bit of a lag between what we're saying and it going to the live feed. So as I'm watching folks coming in or questions coming up, there's probably going to be about a 2-minute delay. So anyway, but we're live.
All right. So welcome, listeners, to the Wild Wild West End. All right. See, I'm so used to introducing my own podcast. Welcome, listeners, to the Modern Texas Naturalist meets the Wild Wild West End, a podcast about Texas wildlife and natural history, and some stories which may be outlandish. So, I'm Greg Hall. My co-host Romy Swanson is here with us, and today we are going to talk about some adventures and some wildlife that we have seen and had in the Big Thicket. Anyone that doesn't know what the Big Thicket is, it is a very large, it's a national wildlife refuge, Romy?
The National Wildlife Preserve or a National Preserve. I don't think wildlife's in the title.
So it is a very large wildlife preserve. And there are several units to the Big Thicket. It's a place that you can go to. And if you just type into Google Maps, the Big Thicket, you might end up any place out in East Texas in a number of different units. So most of what we have done has been focused on the Turkey Creek unit, but we've been to some other areas, but we spent a lot of time in the Turkey Creek unit. So kind of what gets us out there, I'll let Romy talk about, since he works on the National Park Survey out there during the time period that we are usually in the Big Thicket. So if you want to talk a little bit about that before we get going, Romy?
Yeah, absolutely. So quite frankly, I think we sort of acknowledged this during the last podcast that we did. I spent a lot of my time in the Hill Country in South Texas and in West Texas, and North Texas, East Texas has always been kind of an unknown to me. I know generally what's out there, but I had an opportunity through some relationships I'd built to do some bird survey work under a contract with the National Park Service for Big Thicket. And they had me focusing on the Turkey Creek unit, which is a multi-thousand acre unit. Has Turkey Creek and Village Creek intersecting within it. And it's a really nice forested area. And so it was like a rapid introduction to East Texas and, quite frankly, some of the best parts of East Texas. But the survey work was a point survey. So there's a distribution of, I think we had about 60 some points distributed throughout this tens of thousands of acre unit. And we would have to hoof it through the forest, go and conduct the surveys. And so it allowed us to not only take a look at the Big Thicket, to look at Turkey Creek unit, but also to really get intimate with it, because we had to crawl in and through the entire preserve. And so we over the last several years, and when I say us, my wife has participated with me for many of the years. We've gotten to know that preserve and some of the landowners around there. Were some really sweet landowners around there too. So that was the crux of where, Greg and I's experiences has been centered on some of this bird survey work. And, the cool thing about bird survey work, particularly during the breeding season, is you're working for about 4 hours in the morning. And then you're shutting it down because the bird activity, especially the vocalization, diminishes. And so that turns you loose out into some beautiful country about the right time when the herps are starting to pick up. And then there's other opportunities to remain active in your naturalization, exploring things other than our feathered friends.
All right. I think that pretty much covers it. So the place that we stay at, just to give a shout out to these really nice people that run this place, is the Triple D Ranch, which is actually it's a wedding venue, isn't it, Romy?
Yeah, wedding venue. Mm-hmm.
But they let us stay out there. If not, if we aren't able to rent a room from them because they're full or whatever else is going on out there, they have a business to run. They let us stay on the premises, which is really nice of them. Yeah. Anyway, they're really nice people.
They have been incredibly accommodating, and they do run the wedding venue, but the hot time of the hottest part of the wedding season usually ends right around Memorial Day, which is when we start doing the survey work. So usually we've been able to just kind of synchronize when we're coming in and the last wedding that they do. So yeah, it's really it's a sweet spot, and they're also set up kind of as a bed and breakfast, and in the off season, I believe.
So I have a slideshow prepared here that, as we talk about certain animals, I'll put photos that we took of them up on screen. But the first photo that I really want to share is just kind of a photo that, that wasn't supposed to happen. Hang on. Share screen.
Oh Lord.
So this is there from the left going over. We have Aaron Swanson in the middle. There's Romy, and then me over on the right. This is this is the team that we go into the Big Thicket with. Not for the bird survey. To be clear, I'm not actually involved in the park's bird survey yet, anyway. But I usually go out there and I'll do scouting during the day, and just go out there and herp by myself, see what I can see. And then I'll meet up with them when they're done with their morning run, and we'll go out and look. And then we'll also go out again in the evening, and then we hit the roads at night, go to some interesting places out there. So last year year before last, we went out, and the first place that we actually went was that night we went to Ghost Road. Anybody that hasn't heard of Ghost Road, it's a cool place. Supposed to be some paranormal things going out there on Ghost Road, hence the name Ghost Road. It's in Saratoga, which is inside the Big Thicket. And we started our adventure year before last on Ghost Road that first night. I guess it was that Friday night, maybe even Thursday night. But we went out to Ghost Road and went off road. Walked out into some swampy, flooded, pine forest out there, and it was just absolutely full of snakes and the more common thing that you find out there, the frogs. So I mean, this place was just flooded with herps, and I can't remember what all we caught there that night, but the highlight of the evening was that Aaron caught a 50-inch Nerodia erythrogaster, followed quickly by me catching a 54.5-inch Nerodia erythrogaster, which were the two biggest of that species anyone that we had ever seen. And for anyone that following along that may not know what that is the plain-bellied water snake, which is a really common Nerodia species, harmless. But these were the largest ones we had ever seen popped up out there. I thought Aaron was going to absolutely steal the show that night, which he does quite a bit. And then I come up with the 54.5-inch specimen, and we had to hold that thing down and measure it with a 6-inch ruler that Romy had in his backpack. And that was interesting. And I remember at one point it musked, and Aaron said she could hear it. She could hear it let go with its glands when it musked. It was so foul. So
yeah, I just to jump in for just a second, that coming from some of these trips, particularly when we're catching water snakes and working in and around my truck, I've driven around 2 weeks later with people getting in my truck and say, "What is that smell?" And I will have gotten used to it, but boy, it that water snake musk does not disappear.
No. I mean, you get used to it and you think it disappeared, but then somebody else comes along and it definitely has not disappeared. I'm trying to look at my phone and see if maybe I can see if anyone's asking any questions, but I can't seem to do it. So, Romy, you're my lifeline.
No, we're clear on questions.
All right, good.
We got away from Julia.
I know that on Ghost Road we ended up finding 3 species in Nerodia. We found erythrogaster, fasciata, and rhombifer.
Diamondback, right?
Yeah, we found diamondback water snakes, plain-bellied water snakes, and we found broad-banded subspecies water snakes. We found a really interesting broad-banded water snake out there that I hadn't seen one that looked anything like it before. It really lacked those bright reds and other things that you typically see in them. I'm going to put a picture of it up real quick so everybody can see it. I didn't want to do that. I'm gonna have to get more fluent at this. Okay, so there we go. Anyway, this was a beautiful animal that we ran into out there, and that is a photo that I took of it, and this is a photo that Romy took of it, which I thought was quite a bit better than my photo. It doesn't show the detail of the coloration like mine does, but it's a great capture nonetheless. I really like that photo, so I included it in here. And being a guy that keeps a lot of Nerodia, I've looked back often and thought, why the hell didn't I keep that snake? I could have bred that thing and with other confluens that I keep and maybe retain some of that coloration and some babies. But anyway, I didn't. And that also wondered why I didn't keep that 54.5-inch erythrogaster, but I know why I didn't, because that thing would eat me out of house and home. The amount of fish those things eat. So I was
gonna let me jump in for a second, Greg. I'm gonna mention we got a question from Julia. She wants to know how do you measure live snakes? And I bet she would really like to. So I think she would like the right answer, how to correctly measure live snakes, and then she'll like to hear our answer about how you use a 6-inch ruler to measure a 54-inch snake.
All right, well, you take that away.
Well, I don't know that there's ever been any sort of consensus or agreement amongst the folks that I run with on how to measure a snake, but I often just use a tape measure that you would carry with you for the purposes of sewing or measuring your own body measurements if you're in a weight loss, weight gain program. And hopefully your snake is just shorter than that, and you can get a reasonable estimate. You kind of like hold the snake, with its head right here in your hand if it's a non-venomous snake, and you kind of run the tape down, and you're kind of hoping that it cooperates with you and that you're letting it go through your hand. You're pulling the tape at the same time, and then you get to the end and you can measure it. And if you can't do the entire length with one tape, then you're going to need some help. If you can't let loose of the head because you're afraid to get bit in the eyeball, like I'll probably talk about here in a little bit, you'll find other ways to secure your snake. Sometimes people will put them in between their legs to secure the head back that way so they can use both of their hands. And then I've also known like some folks with venomous snakes, they've got some pretty creative ways of doing it. There's plexiglass, clear plexiglass kind of smusher systems where they'll put a snake in the bottom of a tub and they can put the plexiglass on top of it, and they'll draw a line on top of where the snake's backbone is curling around, and then they'll go back and kind of safely measure that. There's all sorts of different proxies. People get creative just in any form of measurement. I'll let Greg talk about how to measure a 54-inch snake with a 6-inch ruler.
Well, so what we did is me and Aaron held this snake down to, on the ground, and we would control short lengths of the snake while Romy measured it with the 6-inch ruler, and we got as close as we could, traveling down the body of that snake, with one of us at each end, and got the closest estimate we could. We could have been holding the state record length, Nerodia erythrogaster, and we don't know it, because we only had an approximation of how long that snake was. We never got it to go out totally straight. I have some photos of that snake I'll show in a second here, so you can see the massive nature of this animal. But just to add a little bit to what Romy was saying about how to actually measure a snake, here's one way you do it. This is what he was talking about with this is a cloth measuring tape that is a lot easier to use than a metal measuring tape would be, a rigid tape. So we will use these a lot of the time. And another thing that we will do sometimes is use a piece of string. What you do is you take a piece of string and you get it at one end of the snake, and you run it down the body of that snake until you get to the very end of the tail. And then you just simply measure the piece of string when you're done. That's the way I've measured some venomous snakes in Arizona while they were tubed. Get their head into the tube, have somebody securing them, get that string as close to the front of the head as you can on the outside of the tube where there's no danger to yourself, then run that string down their body, and then you measure the string when you're done. So that is how those two ways, a cloth tape and a string, are the most accurate way to get your measurement. But I've also seen what he talked about with the plexiglass box. And a lot of people will take a dry erase marker and trace that snake onto the top of that plexiglass and measure that for their approximation. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Unfortunately, with venomous snakes, it's unless you put your hands on that snake and physically restrain it, there's not a lot of perfect ways to measure it. But get it done. And we got it done that night with a 6-inch ruler. So I'm gonna show that snake.
Yeah, go ahead and show it, Greg. One of the great things. So Ghost Road, what is that? Just north of Saratoga. It's it's an old railroad way. It's an abandoned railroad right of way that goes right through the forest, and then now it's just maintained as a dirt county road. It's a great road. I don't think that, although Greg's describing bukus of water snakes, and we've certainly seen cottonmouths along there, the snake diversity outside of water snakes and semi-aquatic snakes, hasn't been real high, but there's a lot of like flooded marshland and wetland habitat around it. So I think that predominantly in those sorts of habitats, you're going to see those assemblage of species more so than others. I would love to always get really eager thinking like, oh, we're going to see box turtles and salamanders crossing the road. And it's just not that type of road, at least not in my limited amount of experience. But it is an incredible road for hearing frog and anurine diversity. We've got, a couple species of toads, several species of frogs. I'm sure there's salamanders out there if I just knew how to find them. And if we were out there, not in late May, but in the first cold rains of the spring, looking around in some of the pools, vernal pools out there for salamanders. So it's a really cool place. You're going to see some interesting things, and the bird life's really interesting along there too. So you got that picture up, Greg?
I had it up. I took it down though.
Oh yeah, tell us about that thing, man. That thing's huge.
Well, I told you all about it. It's a big ass snake. It's definitely the biggest one I have seen, and maybe we'll ever see. But just to add to that a little bit, I know another guy, John Mariani, has actually found a dead timber rattlesnake on Ghost Road. And he has not found a live one. And I think he found a hognose out there. And I think you might have found western rat snakes out there. And I know I have when I was out there on my own before. So there's a lot of really common snakes out there that you can find. The timber rattlesnake not being one of them. It may be locally common, but it's not overall a common snake. We have not been lucky enough to find a timber rattlesnake anywhere in the Big Thicket yet. That's one of our targets. We're hopefully going to be back there this year, and hopefully we're going to find one. Which unfortunately that snake was just delisted by the state of Texas and lost its protected status.
Fortunately is delisted. The point of any status, protected status, is to recover the species.
You're absolutely right. I'm glad that they preserved enough habitat and that the numbers look good on those snakes. You're right. That is absolutely the way I should look at it. But sometimes from a conservationist standpoint, we sometimes get a little bit sad when something loses its protected status because, but it's not like all of a sudden tomorrow people are going to kill more timber rattlesnakes than they did a week ago because it was protected. People that kill rattlesnakes don't really look at the protected status of them before they do it. They're not like looking it up before they axe the snake. So, I don't think that's really going to matter much.
A fun bit of trivia whenever you could walk into the room and somebody would ask the question, what is the only protected venomous snake in the state of Texas? Now there's no longer an answer. Yeah. The answer is none. It used to be the timber or cane brake rattlesnake, which is probably one of the most beautiful that we have.
It is, but that answer is only partially true, Romy. The northern cat-like snake is still protected in this state. Well,
there you go. Yeah, technically venomous.
It is medically insignificant venom, but it is venom.
So we got another question. Our friend Julia again. I think she's kind of going into the theme of Ghost Road, and she's asking, when do we see these animals, day or night?
It is definitely night. You want to tell them about what happened to us out there, or you want me to?
I don't know what story you're telling about. There's so many. Anytime you go out to East Texas and you're in the boonies, there's going to be plenty of stories. So I don't know which one you're talking about, but I'll give a quick answer and I'll let you do the story, right. The color commentary. The quick answer is you have a different group, particularly with snakes. You have different groups that are active at different times of the day. If you want to see something like a coach whip, or something that's really a hot-blooded snake, you're going to probably work the daytimes because they're hunting lizards out during the day. Then you have some that are considered crepuscular. They're going to be active in the early part of the morning and right before dawn, or right before dusk. A lot of times, if we were in West Texas, I would say this is a good time to go look for gopher snakes, bull snakes, and several others. But by and far, I think you get the widest diversity of snakes, particularly when you're road cruising at night. And they're easier to catch. They're easier. You see them, and they see headlights, and so they may pause and give you an opportunity to come and look at them before they slither off the road. Same thing with a lot of other critters. And then the frogs are usually very vocal at night, chorusing. And so if you have an ear for identifying species by their chorus songs, then you can really find a lot of diversity in the evenings.
All right. Well,
yeah, go ahead, Greg.
So as far as the paranormal side of Ghost Road, look, I'm not an overly superstitious, not suspicious. I'm suspicious as hell. I'm not overly superstitious, but I have had several experiences on Ghost Road. So one of the things that people say they see on Ghost Road is they say that they see an oncoming train, the light of an oncoming train. which has been explained by many people as the reflection of the headlights on a nearby freeway, reflecting off the pavement because there's a hill there, which I 100% believe that is what people see. But that's not the only thing that occurs out there on Ghost Road. I went out there before I ever went out there and went herping. I went one night. Me and my fiance Laura saw a story about Ghost Road pop up. So we just decided at like 10:30 p.m. Hey, let's just drive out there. So we drive out there. We get there after midnight and we go cruising down this road. There's no other people out there. It's deserted, and we almost immediately start to see, ghost lights out in the woods. There are some houses out there. We were thinking that there could be people. So we chalked that up to maybe other people being out there looking around. And then at one point we're stopped in the middle of the road and we see this light come out of the woods behind our vehicle. And I'm thinking it's somebody it looks like somebody holding a flashlight. So we're seeing lights ahead of us at this point. So I say, hey, I'm going to get out and see if these people are seeing lights too. So I jump out and run back there, and that light jets off into the woods at like 1,000,000 miles an hour. And it was not a person with a flashlight. It was a floating light of some kind. And I saw it and Laura saw it, and I have no reason to lie to anybody about it. But we also saw multicolored lights out in the woods that night. And that was my first experience at Ghost Road. We drove home after that, and, that was that. And then when I'm out there with Romy and Aaron, we had like a small, I don't know if anyone, like an orb, like a small light, fly across the road in front of us. Could it have been our headlights reflecting off of a large insect or a bat or something? I guess it could have been, but it sure didn't look like it. It looked like a floating light streaked across the road in front of us. Then they went to bed, and later that night I went road cruising around by myself. And when I was over by the pitcher plant trail in the Big Thicket, I saw it happen again. So there's definitely something going on out there. Maybe it's swamp gas or some kind of light phenomenon. Maybe it's not ghosts, but it's definitely... it's a curiosity when you're with 2 or 3 other people. It's a serious safety concern when you're by yourself at like 3:45 in the morning out in the middle of the Big Thicket. So it rattled me a little bit at that point. But anyway, the point of this episode is not. Go ahead.
No, so all about Ghost Road.
Yeah.
No, when the first time that I ever went out, a couple of years before we started doing surveys, I took my son out there. I was in the middle of a big bird year, so I had to go hit East Texas for some specialties out there. And I took my son. We went camping, but we hit Ghost Road the first time I ever went down there, and there was we sure enough saw a green orb that was like, well, that's obviously just somebody up there. We'll drive up. And as we got closer, it got further away. It's funny. I've been out, spent a lot of time out in West Texas, looked at the Marfa Lights viewing station, never seen anything. But boy, that Ghost Road is a surefire supernatural light situation. I got one clarification that I got to make. Earlier, I was talking about snakes and different times of days to look for different types of snakes. I talked about coach whips, and I said the word hot-blooded, which John Carr just reminded me might be misinterpreted to suggest that snakes can be warm-blooded animals between cold-blooded and warm-blooded. I know we don't like to use warm-blooded, cold-blooded, but indeed there are no technically warm-blooded Texas snakes. And I was just simply referring to that these are snakes that like to run during the hot part of the day, that they're tolerant of hotter temperatures. And so just a quick little clarification.
Yeah,
Thank you, John, for...
strongly diurnal. I've actually never thought a coach whip at night.
So a lot there about Ghost Road. Half of the way into the podcast, and we haven't even talked about Big Thicket, Turkey Creek.
No, I know. But just to, real quick, Ghost Road was actually the only location that we had Cajun chorus frogs at. We managed to wade into a field of flooded grass and catch and pull probably the only squirrel tree frog out of all of those calling Cajun cricket frogs and photograph it and think it was a Cajun chorus frog. And here we are 2 years later, we have finally hashed it out. And that was in fact a squirrel tree frog, probably the only one out there in that field of flooded grass. And we found it.
I got this. I wanted to say, this is what that sound that they make is a lot like this. The fingers going over the comb. the Cajun chorus frog. It's one of my favorite calls.
So let me show real quick the squirrel tree frog that we caught in the middle of a field of Cajun chorus frogs.
Squirrel tree frog that wasn't.
There we go. There's that puppy right there. That is the squirrel tree frog, the Cajun tree chorus frog that wasn't. So we have actually, looking at it now is obviously a squirrel tree frog, but when you pull that thing out of that field of flooded grass, when all those other Cajun chorus frogs are calling, you're out there in the middle of the night snapping some quick photographs. And then not only that, but I had the state herpetologist and Michael Price both had to go research grade on INAT as a Cajun chorus frog for 2 years before we finally discovered the error. Because Romy, I'm not going to be I'm going to be humble here and say that Romy immediately, almost within a day, had corrected me and said that was a squirrel tree frog, and I refused to believe it. And I'm going to give him credit where credit is due. That is definitely a squirrel tree frog.
2 years later.
2 years later.
And to everybody's defense, it was largely because we were looking at the photographs of the pattern from the top and not having the benefit of that side shot that you just shared. A lot of folks were looking at that just looking straight down on it, which it was a confusing pattern. But when you look at it in profile like that, there are some field marks that kind of start giving it away. And in context, Greg and I, just like you described, there might have been 1,000 calling Cajun chorus frogs and nothing else that could be heard. Maybe they were drowning out the other species. And we pluck out one from this little flooded pasture, which is, by the way, habitat for chorus frogs and not necessarily habitat that we assume to find the squirrel tree frog, although you find those almost anywhere, I guess. So, it was just kind of like picking the needle out of a haystack, and it wasn't hay.
Yep. So let's relocate this narrative to Turkey Creek. I have already showed kind of the superstar snake that we found at Turkey Creek in 2 photos at the very beginning, but I have a couple better photos of it that I wanted to show off here. One of them was taken by me, but this first one I'm going to show is taken by Romy. Here we go. Come on, go full screen. So Romy took this photo here, which is great, and this is the photo that I took, my best one. And so we absolutely turned Turkey Creek inside out looking for this snake for like 3 days. And as we are arriving back at our cabin on that last night we were there, we're done. We are getting back to the cabin to go to bed. We pull up into the parking area, and you could see this snake slithering along the sidewalk of the cabins we were staying in. And Romy jumps out, and first he rails, "It's a mud snake," and jumps out of the truck and runs over there. So we catch this thing literally on the front porch of the cabins we are staying in after we have waded through marshy mud hell trying to find one of these snakes for 3 days. But we did find the snake. I mean, or it found us, however you want to look at it. And we got the shots, and it said, no, you know what? That wasn't the last night, because I'll tell you why I know that. Because we put that snake in a bag so we could get photos of it later. And the next day when we were going down that creek and you flipped over and you were so pissed off after you lost your GPS unit and all your gear was wet, I remember telling you, "Don't sweat it, man. We got a mud snake in a bag back at the cabin."
Yeah. Keep my spirits pretty high.
Yeah. So that was that's kind of the cool. I think the coolest snake that we found in the Big Thicket. But there's another one that's kind of a close runner up. All right. So we caught the mud snake year before last. Last year we were there, and one of my target snakes while I was there was the tan racer, and everybody they're worn out from their bird survey in the morning. And they're like, "We're gonna take a nap." And I said, "All right, well, I'm going to go catch a tan racer." And they all kind of laughed. And I drove out there, and hell, I'd be damned if tan racer didn't shoot out in the road in front of me half a mile from where we were camping at. So I caught this tan racer that I'm going to show you. And it was a beautiful snake. and it has now gone back to where I caught it. I actually did keep the snake for about 6 months. It laid eggs. I hatched all the eggs, and I released the mother and 17 babies back at the same spot where I caught her at. So I'd like to think maybe I helped out a little bit there. Maybe not all those snakes would have all those babies would have hatched in the wild. Maybe that nest would have got predated. Those snakes actually come from a very small area on the map. It's the only place you can find them is where these 3 counties meet right there. Anyway, I did catch the tan racer. I think Romy and them, I think they found a dead one later, but I caught the live.
Yeah, the irony was, I was like, oh my gosh, he comes out here, he's talking about catching a very specific snake that I don't know how common they are, but I don't see a lot of racers. I know racers can be pretty common in some areas, but and he found one. Sure enough, he just willed himself to find one, and then the next day, the next day, Aaron and I found one dead on the road on the way out. And just a real quick point. So at the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about the Triple D Ranch, which is where we stay when we're out there working. And that's where that doggone mud snake was. I've got at least another story that we can talk about a salamander that we were looking, or a newt that we were looking for a while out there. And it shows up in the grass. I mean, that place has kind of been a bit of a honey hole that we could work as hard as we want to, sweating in the muck, getting close to getting bit by cottonmouths in the eyeballs, and then not turn anything up, and then pull into the driveway to the place we're staying and, have the gifts of nature right there on the doorstep. It's pretty amazing. Greg, we got another question I thought I'd pose to you. You probably are a little bit more informed on this than I might be. Julia asks on she asks about Ghost Road, but we can just kind of speak to it in general. What sort of acreage would a snake need for habitat, and are they territorial?
I am maybe not the most informed person in the world about that. You would have to ask a true herpetologist about that, which I am actually not, despite what some people may believe. But in general, it's agreed upon that snakes stay within a home range of 1/8 of a mile to a half a mile. The way that I've come by that information is there have been several studies about snake relocation and mortality. So some people say if you move a snake more than a mile, it has a 50% mortality rate. But there's some other studies that show it's a much shorter range. One is a half a mile. I know I go by the Tim Cole rule. All right. If anybody knows who Tim Cole is, I don't know if Tim might be watching us right now, but the Tim Cole rule is 1/8 of a mile. So I trust Tim Cole. He is a well-respected, well-known Texas snake guy. I don't want to harm any animal. So if I'm going to relocate a snake, it's going to be within 1/8 of a mile of where that snake was originally caught. I try to release them back right where they were caught if it's not a relocation situation. Like a relocation situation would be somebody calls me and says, hey, there's a snake in my yard. Can you come get it out of my yard? Then I'm going to take it to the closest available habitat where I think it's not going to get back immediately in their yard, and I'm going to release it within 1/8 of a mile. So they don't have very big territories. And I got a lot of experience with Western Diamondbacks because I work on a 700-acre preserve where there's lots of Western Diamondbacks. I will commonly find the same ones within a 30-yard area. I'll go out looking for a specific snake that I know I've encountered it here. I'll look in a 30-yard sweep around that area. And often, not 100%, not even 50% of the time, will you even find a snake, period. But if I'm going to find that snake again, it's usually going to be within 30 yards of where I found it the first time. So I don't know what that turns into in terms of acreage, but they generally have a pretty small home range. So I hope that answers your question at least a little bit. The picture I'm displaying is of the salamander, or the newt more properly, that Romy mentioned a little bit ago. That is a central newt. So they found that at the Triple D as well. So that place has been great. I wasn't there for that ride, but
for a little more color on that snake territory question. So in general, Greg's describing the trait of fidelity, meaning that, many critters are going to show fidelity to a site, to a home range. and they're going to sort of mentally map out where the resources are, and they're going to sort of commit to that as long as they can sustain themselves. But we do know that some species, and maybe this doesn't happen as much in Texas as some of the other northern climates, that some species can have big home ranges if you include the area that they winter at, because they'll travel, they'll migrate a pretty good ways away from the area that they'll occupy during the normal feeding and nesting season, and they'll overwinter in this area that could be much further away. And then I recall when I was in college, like there was some maybe loose correlation between the mean adult body size of a snake. So you have some very small diminutive snakes that are really small that'll have smaller home ranges than your bigger bodied ones. And I don't know if that's evenly applicable to all species. I would assume not. And then lastly, just behavioral traits. We know that some snakes can kind of visually, mentally map out ambush sites within a territory, and they're going to cruise around. And if this site's not particularly productive, they may go to their next one, to their next one, to the next one. And then some snakes are very opportunistic, like the coach we were talking about earlier. They're just out cruising around. Their modus operandi is to intersect something that they can eat and use their eyes to catch visually a lizard moving around and chase it down. So they may show much less fidelity or have a bigger range size than a similar snake of similar size that utilizes a different hunting methodology.
Good, thorough answer. Back to salamanders, we've actually only caught one other species of the probably 4 or 5 that exist inside the big thicket. We also caught dwarf salamanders on both years, I believe, that we were out there. And the best place to do that seemed to be the pitcher plant trail area. There was a kind of a carpet of moss on the ground at some of the places we went, and we would peel that up off the ground. It would come up just in sheets. And that is where we found a couple of these dwarf salamanders at. And I actually found one on my own in the Big Sandy Creek unit one time too. And I'm going to show you guys a photo of a dwarf salamander and how small it actually is, because they are a tiny animal. And they're a lot faster than most salamanders too. There you go. That's a dwarf salamander at its adult size. I've actually kept these guys in captivity, and they eat very little. All I could get them to eat was mosquito larvae, and they would live in a container of wet paper towels. That's how they did the best. And they would hide within those wet paper towels, and they would swim around once in a while and eat those mosquito larvae out of the water that I put in there. Anyway, very small animal, and roughly the speed of like a little brown skink. Way faster than you would think of a salamander being. Most salamanders are real slow moving. These guys are not. They are very quick. Anyway, that is one. I think that's one that Aaron found. That's a common thread, is that Aaron finds the stuff.
Aaron finds most of the stuff.
Yeah, so those are the 2 salamanders we found. We found the central newt and the dwarf salamander, both in the Turkey Creek unit. So is there another particular animal you want to talk about, Rowie? Because I got a whole bunch of slides prepared.
I got 2 points I'll make real quick. One is, the salamanders. There's probably a half a dozen other salamanders we'd love to see out there, especially some of the bigger bodied ones. But again, they're active when we're not there, and I just haven't made that trip yet. But I've got some friends, Scott Wahlberg, Ashley Wahlberg, and Matt Buckingham, that are just freaking all-stars at finding those critters and taking incredible photographs. And Matt is his blog that he runs is an incredible blog and tome of natural history, and there's a lot of space there dedicated towards East Texas, Big Thicket, and these types of salamanders. The second point was this is a great clarification that our friend John Cargis is making in the chat. Probably worth differentiating territory versus territoriality. So I don't know that I'll get the exact scientific term right, but territory is the area that's being utilized by the animal. So you can think of it as a 2-dimensional space, 3-dimensional if it's birds or arboreal snakes or tree climbing snakes. But the territoriality is the area of that home range that is actively defended, trying to keep the other critters of the other critters completely out of this space, where there might be an allowance that the same species, individuals of the same species might be able to cross into, but there's a threshold that is going to be actively defended. I would define that part as being the area that an animal might show territoriality in defense of.
But I lied. We actually found 3 species of salamander. What was the other one, Romy?
What was the other one?
It was the
I'm not
one
recalling.
that you were so upset that you couldn't catch. And you
the three-toed Amphiuma. My gosh.
There are no photos
Yeah.
of that animal, sadly.
There's no photos of that. And let me just say that I'm probably happy that I wasn't able to catch it, because this was a flooded, this was a flooded area. The water was a couple of feet high, where I was wading through it, and I saw this black snake-like animal at the bottom of the water with my headlamp. And I was like, oh, I think that's an Amphiuma. And I grabbed it, and that slimy sucker just slipped. And this thing was 3 feet long, and it just slipped right out of my hands. And thankfully it did, because those, you wouldn't think of it, but this particular salamander can draw a pretty good bite on you. And I was not prepared for that. I might have been going in debt on man cards. I'm already out of man cards. Greg would be very happy to tell you why. But I may have gone in debt, because I would have screamed and ran in that situation.
Yeah, I saw the animal too. I got over there quick enough that I saw it swimming in the water, and we had it lit up, but we just could not catch it. It isn't Romy's fault that it didn't get caught. It was a team of 3 of us, and none of us, Romy briefly put hands on it, but we weren't equipped for it. We weren't out there looking for 3-toed Amphiuma. We were out there looking truthfully, we were out there looking for timber rattlesnakes. We were on Timber Slough Road, and another place that John Mariani had tipped me off to that they're supposed to be common out there. We didn't find one, though. We found the usual thing that we find, a bunch of frogs in the rhodia. We did find some pretty cool frogs out there, though. Fowler's toads, and Woodhouse's toads, and a bunch of what apparently are integrades of the two, and really hard to nail down which they are. There's something going on out there in the Big Thicket with the toad population. I don't know if Gulf Coast toads would integrate with them or not. What's she laughing at over there?
Car just he's in the chat. He's just pointing out that he's probably just needs to go ahead and get a third screen up here and bring him in.
I am 100% with that. I would love for that to happen.
He would have way better stories than we would. I promise you that.
Do you have Zoom, John?
He can get it.
He needs to get it. He's in episode 3.
We got a 2-minute delay anyway so he won't be able to answer that live.
True. Anyway, we can make that happen though. We sure can. Just to keep us on track though, we covered the salamanders now, and I talked just a little bit about frogs right now. That there's something going on out there in the Big Thicket with frogs, with toads specifically, and toad integration between 3 species of toads that we find out there. The Gulf Coast, which I think they're now referring to as the coastal plains toad, because there's some confusion in that common name with the Mexican toad, which is also referred to as the Gulf Coast toad. So the coastal plains toad is one of the species. Then there's the Fowler's toad, which is another species. Then there's the Woodhouse's toad. Now the Fowlers and Woodhouses apparently are the ones that are doing the integrating the most, because we find frogs out there that it's really tough to tell, is this a Woodhouse's toad? Is this a Fowler's toad? And truthfully, none of the 3, me, Romy, or Aaron, being true frog experts in any sense of the word, it's tough for us to tell. I'd actually planned to try to get Dustin Rhodes, a herpetologist I know, to join us in the Big Thicket, but those talks kind of stalled. And I'd still love to have him come out and lend a hand with the unofficial surveying that we do out there, because we're not inputting this data anywhere except like INAT. It's not going to any study or anything, which I'd like to see change at some point, because we do a lot of running around and beating those bushes out there for animals, and for nothing but our own personal enrichment, which is important, to be clear. But I'd like to see it go towards some bigger goal. But back to those frogs. I got some photos of some of these frogs. I got photos of a bunch of frogs. I'm going to run through some of them. So you're not going to see me on screen for a minute here while I talk about some of these frogs.
Oh,
yeah, I know. It's upsetting, isn't it?
Wait, me too?
So let me get back to frogs from current slide. Okay, so I can't tell you which species of a frog this one right here is. It's either a gray tree frog or a Cope's gray tree frog. It's part of the Hyla versicolor complex. I did not hear this particular frog call, but we did record frog calls from both gray tree frogs and Cope's gray tree frogs while we were there. So we observed both species. The reason I can't tell you which one this one is what I said. I never heard it call. The frogs look so similar that even the best can't tell them apart except for by the call. So that's the gray tree frog / Cope's gray tree frog was one of the species we got in Turkey Creek. And then I'm pretty sure this one's a Fowler's toad, but once again, I'm just pretty sure. Maybe somebody like John out there can comment on that. Maybe they could tell from that photo exactly what that is. But the best we got was that it was probably a Fowler's toad. Might have been a Woodhouse's toad. So we've already looked at this picture. This is the squirrel tree frog that we thought was the Cajun chorus frog. Doesn't happen often that we get one wrong. Sometimes, but we, I got that one wrong at least. So this one is one that that's a pretty neat animal. We actually did not find these when we were together, but Romy and I have both separately encountered spring peepers in the Big Thicket, which are a super cool little frog. They're very vocal. I didn't prepare frog calls to play on this podcast.
Very distinct call. This one does. It sounds like a crosswalk. Beep, 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 beep. So, something like that, like a crosswalk.
So I actually have a podcast all about frogs that has their calls in it. Frogs of Galveston County, and I got spring peeper in there because they do occur in the county. So if anybody's interested in that, the Wild Wild West End, Frogs of Galveston County, you can hear all these frogs call, or a lot of these frog calls in there. So this one was actually caught by my son when he was 5 years old, which was it was totally awesome. I take my son out there occasionally to go out there and live out his dreams of catching every frog in the Big Thicket. And he caught this spring peeper, and this was actually the first spring peeper I ever saw. With my son caught it. So, and I think Romy had a similar thing happen with him and Christian.
Yeah, we were headed out the Ghost Road, and I stopped and saw a small frog jumping across the road on a wet night, and we excitedly pulled out, took some pictures of something that I couldn't identify from memory, and I wasn't able to get a positive ID on our first spring peeper until we got back to the casa, and I got into my books. It was a fun night, though. We had a lot of frog first for both my son and so that's a tie that binds right there.
Yeah, for sure, man. So this is a bronze frog, or more precisely, it is a green frog. But this is the bronze morph. That used to be a subspecies, but now they're just considered to be green frogs. This is one photo I took of a bronze frog that we saw while we were there. And this next one, this is actually a photo of the first bronze frog that my son ever caught. So once again, there's that tie that binds, man.
Yeah.
Fowler's toad. This is actually my lifer Fowler's toad that I encountered on the road in the Big Thicket, which there is I didn't adjust anything in that photo. That is an unedited photo. All I did was crop it and zoom in on that frog. That's exactly the way it looked. So that was pretty neat. Now, this I think was a Woodhouse's toad. I think, once again. Maybe again, somebody like John that's out there might look at that and say, "Nah, that's a Fowler's toad," or maybe that's an integrade. But this is the closest I found to what looked like a pure Woodhouse's toad the whole time we were there. That's another Fowler's toad. Looks quite a bit different than that first one. So it's a variable frog. We caught a lot of them while we were out there. We were driving through those dirt roads. There'd be some tire ruts full of water. And man, there would just be so many frogs congregated on those things. And then the water snakes would start to show up. So right after dark, and it would just be a smorgasbord of herps activity around those tire ruts. It was pretty neat. We caught lots of snakes and lots of frogs that night with Lee. What's the Lee's last name?
Coatman.
He was Lee that was with us last year also accompanied us on our nighttime frog finding events, and I think he had a pretty good time. So many people are going to be familiar with the green tree frog. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it's a common frog out there in the Big Thicket. Southern leopard frog, also very common out there. Now, another frog that really favors this frog that we did not find while we were out there was the pickerel frog, which there are records of in the Big Thicket, and we have yet to find one. So that's another target animal for us.
Yeah.
Let's see, squirrel tree frog. There's lots of them out there calling, huge choruses of them calling, and easy to find. American bullfrog, quite a few of them. A similar frog that we have not found yet in the Big Thicket that is supposed to exist there is the pig frog. Pretty much the only way to tell those apart, I think, is some people can tell by the face or the nostril placement, I believe, but it's actually the toes that are the true tell. I can't remember what it is. I think they have one rear toe that's longer than the rest, kind of like chorus frogs. Blanchard's cricket frogs, lots of them out there. And as far as frogs we have caught, I think that pretty much rounds it out. So I'm going to kill that now and come back on screen for a minute.
Yeah, we got a question on frogs real quick that coming from Julia a little earlier. She asked what the range for Strecker's chorus frog is. And that's a frog I'm pretty familiar with within the eastern part of the Edwards Plateau. I think it's an eastern species for Texas, and you can find it in the eastern half of the state, maybe a little bit in the South Texas. We get them in Hayes County. I've had them on a few, the eastern part of the hill country, and that's another frog during the first kind of cold rains of spring. You'll hear those things calling off, and they got a similar call to that spring peeper that we were talking about from East Texas with that beep, 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 that crosswalk call. And you'll actually hear some folks call them spring peepers mistakenly.
So I pulled up the Herps of Texas range map here. Those green highlighted areas are all the counties that the Streckler's chorus frog has been observed in pre-1998 records. This is not updated past 1998. So anyway, that's the range, that right there.
Did it show Northern Bear County? Can you show that one more time?
Sure.
And again, I shouldn't, she asked about territory, but I think she meant range, the range of the species, the territory of the individual.
I don't know where Northern Bear County is on that map.
Yeah, it's there. It's kind of little southeast of geographic center of the map, but it's highlighted in green.
Okay. So well, there we go.
Mal and Hayes. It looks like Kendall doesn't have a record for it, which we should be able to find one.
So information age, baby. If we don't know the answer, we can get it as long as you don't want to go past 1998. Past 1998, there is no truth. So anyway, that's kind of the frogs in a nutshell that we found out there. That whole Ghost Road episode at the beginning made us go kind of long there. So I wanted to move us along through the frogs as quickly as I could. Now the turtle section is going to be pretty short. We have not been extremely successful at finding turtles in the Big Thicket, which you would think it wouldn't be that hard, but it's a lot of flooded, murky, green water, and it's actually kind of tough to find turtles out there. But we do have 3 species that we found in the last couple of years out there. I got those all lined up here. So those are going to be this is the only photo we managed to get of a false map turtle that me and Romy encountered this turtle while we were barreling down Noble Creek. And we actually saw some other turtles, but couldn't get any photos of them. But I think that they were all false map turtles that we saw out there. So that is the one photo we have of the false map turtle. And then there was this beauty that I was not there to see, but yeah, like I ain't never seen one, but I hadn't seen one in the Big Thicket in a long time. And just to talk a little bit about that, Big Thicket's a really special place for me. I grew up. My grandfather lived next door to me for my entire childhood, but then he moved to the Big Thicket. He moved to Rye, which is on the doorstep of the Big Thicket. So I would go and spend my summers in Rye, Texas, and we would go drive around the Big Thicket. He was a birder and a naturalist, and I believe that his true ambition was to find an ivory-billed woodpecker in the Big Thicket, which he never did do. Of course, he didn't, because as we believe, they are extinct. But anyway, it made the Big Thicket a special place for me, because he took me road cruising all through the Big Thicket a whole lot of times, and I caught lots of snakes, and he let me do it. And I caught box turtles out there when I was a young man, and but I hadn't seen one there in many, many years, so I'd like to see one. And Aaron and Romy stole that from me. I didn't get to see one, but they did.
Don't worry, bud. You just hang out. We'll get you one. We'll get you one.
Yeah, and
I was going to say, this turtle, we were running a little late, and the way that we do these surveys is I drop Aaron and I drop Lee off, and then they go do a route, and they'll go pick up 2 or 3, 4 points in a day, and then I'll go do the same. I'll drop myself off at the trailhead. But we were on route to drop one of them off. I can't remember who, and it was just like locking up the brakes, getting back, getting over there. This was a lot of excitement, delaying the start of our bird surveys that morning just to spend some time with this turtle. And boy, it was nice, because we'd been working out there for 4 consecutive years. And I think we put at least like 6 work days per year in. And between the 3-person team, you would assume that walking all the miles of the forest that you would see more box turtles. But I think that that's an indication of how poorly these populations are across much of the state. Although they remain healthy and viable in much of the state, they are diminished or extirpated in many other places. And in some of the places that they do remain, they seem to be on a steep decline, or at least that's anecdotally what we're seeing in conversations with old timers to what we're seeing today through our own eyes.
So the only other species of turtle that we have is, hold on to your seats, the red-eared slider. We've seen a lot of red-eared sliders out there. Just like you see a lot of red-eared sliders just about everywhere in Texas, unless you just get out into West Texas, and then you have a few honey holes you can find them in during snake days, because you need that extra species. But yeah, there's a lot of red-eared sliders in the Big Thicket. So that's pretty much it on turtles that we have seen out there so far. There's a lot more turtles in the Big Thicket that we could see that we just haven't yet. Well, I don't know about a lot, but there's
You got a snake question coming from John, one that I don't have a clue on how to answer, so I'll pose it to you.
All right.
Relative to the Big Thicket, where do tan and buttermilk racers intersect or intergrade?
So I have personally never found a buttermilk racer in the Big Thicket myself, but I have found a tan racer. Tan racers are right on there's 3 counties that meet up. It's Warren County. Do you know the other 2?
No, not off the top.
I'm not great on counties. There's a very small spot in the Big Thicket where you can find tan racers. It's not a very big area at all. And I would assume that if I know buttermilks are supposed to be out there, I would assume that right around the edge of that spot where you can find the tan racers, there would be some integrades going on, and that gene flow from those tan racers probably makes it out into the buttermilk racer population that's in the greater area of the Big Thicket. I think there's probably eastern yellow-bellied racers out there too. I'm not 100% certain on that. I hadn't found one out there, but I would imagine that they're out there. I could be mistaken on that though. I definitely caught them up in the hill country, and they exist here in Galveston County. So I would think that they're probably over there. It's Romy, you gonna look it up. That's good. I could look it up on Herbst in Texas, but he's got the book in his hand. So I unfortunately can't answer that question for you, John. I wish I could. I know that on a similar note, Waller County has some intergrade eastern yellow belly or intergrade flaviventris anthicus snakes going on there. I've seen them pop up now and then. My friend kept one for a while, and like a lot of colubers do in captivity, just didn't adjust real well. I know a little bit about the intergrade zone in that area, but as much as that time as I spent in the big thicket as a kid, it wasn't on a scientific level. I was just a kid out there catching snakes, and only recently, in like the last 3 years, have I begun to revisit herping in the big thicket, with Romy and Aaron. So there's a lot I have to learn about herping in the area, but there's a lot I've learned already. So you've given me something else to learn, John. I'll try to get back to you with an answer on that.
That's one of the benefits to visiting with John, is that you're going to open up a bunch of rabbit holes.
Yeah, you know how much you don't know.
And then you're going to not be able to go to sleep at night because the pursuit of knowledge will pop into your head right as you're winding it down for the day. Quick answer. So the tan racer is just coming in as sort of a finger, directly, like kind of parallel, going straight over to Louisiana. That would include those three, much of those three counties that we're working in, which are Hardin, maybe some of Tyler, but Hardin, and I don't know the other counties' names, and it's not coming up here. Yeah, Google Earth isn't doing me any favors right now. But and then the speckled racer or buttermilk racer is both above, wraps around to the west, and then kind of tinkers out as indicated by this range map. Oh man, my camera's not going to do it, but like right there. So everything between this and that is tan racer, and then the tan racer range intersects that round shape there, which is the buttermilk.
Genus Coluber is wild. All the intergrades that go on that most people don't even know about. I love Genus Coluber. They're some of my favorite snakes. So I'm actually kind of surprised that I didn't know that answer. But again, that kind of harkens back to that. I haven't spent the amount of time in the big thicket as an adult equal to what I did as a kid when range maps and things didn't matter to me. So I'm still learning about what's going on out there. But
hey Greg, how would you define intergrade?
Okay, so that's really debatable. I define intergrade, and I think a lot of people do, as snakes within a genus breeding with each other and producing offspring. But that's not always the case, because when a copperhead and a cottonmouth share a genus, but yet the cottonhead is a hybrid. So that's one of those hard questions that a lot of people can't answer, not just me. I refer to it as an intergrade when it's a coluber or a Nerodia. Certain types of Nerodia will breed together and cause intergrades. But I guess you could actually refer to them as a hybrid. They are distinct species interbreeding. Yeah. So now a lot of people will define an intergrade as a subspecies, as two subspecies integrating with each other. Like, for instance, all of the coluber that we're talking about are subspecies, not species. So like the buttermilk racer is Anthicus, the yellow-bellied racer is Flaviventris, the tan racer is Eldritchi, I believe. So I think when two subspecies produce offspring together, that's what I would refer to as an intergrade. When two distinct species produce offspring together, that's what I would refer to as a hybrid. How do you like that answer, John Carges?
John offers hybrids are different from intergrades within a single species. So I leave it to you guys to debate that. I would say an area of intergrading is just, if it can be applied broadly, if you'll allow that it is where the range of two species or subspecies overlap and allow for the contact of those animals and the offspring to be made that are sort of this hybrid. So it's kind of the zone of integration between two different races, subspecies, species. If you're thinking about it very broadly, and in our area, Julia, we might think about black-crested titmouse versus tufted titmouse, and we have those two species sort of integrating on a line right kind of parallels the edge of the Edwards Plateau, interface with the Lackland Prairie and Post Oak Savannah ecoregions to the east. So maybe that helps you a little bit thinking through the bird lens.
Yeah, but looking through the bird lens as well, a lot, like I know ornithologists that are going to refer to those intergrades between the black crested and what's the other one? I'm on the spot. I can't think of it. I know birds too. Tufted. They refer to those as hybrid birds. Just like like the Lawrence's warbler. That's a hybrid bird. It's not an intergrade. They were so maybe the answer. Yeah, maybe the answer is that these two terms are used in different areas. Like maybe the intergrade, the term intergrade refers to the area where the two species breed together, and hybrid is actually the true term for hybridization is what happens. I think a lot of people use the word integrate incorrectly. Me maybe being one of those people. It's just a habit that I've picked up because I know a lot of snake breeders, and they refer a lot to snakes within a genus breeding or subspecies breeding together as integrades. So I think we droned on about this a lot.
Julia, you find yourself an answer that just like you just put into the chat, clear as mud.
Yep. Clear.
And that people that should know better are clearly just as confused as people that may have not had the opportunity for an orientation to intergrades.
I'm gonna give a disclaimer right now. I actually have no formal college education, especially in biology. Biology, least of all. I have a degree in computer systems, occupational technology, maybe evidenced by the technical difficulties Romy having over here that I'm not. His screen looks all jacked up, and it's all colors and flashing everywhere. And
yeah, it's
my
really up camera in my computer.
Yeah, it's all right though. So I'm gonna move on to lizards. We likewise, our selection on lizards is pretty small. One reason that is because I don't have a photo of one of the lizards that we have encountered there. I shouldn't have done that. I did it wrong again. Here we go. Share screen. Here we go. So this specimen right here is actually a common 5-line skink, which we were able to catch many of and photograph in the Big Thicket, although this particular photograph was not taken in the Big Thicket. It was taken in Lafitte's Cove here in Galveston. But we caught lots of 5-line skinks out there. They're common skink, easy to find, beautiful, by the way. That's a juvenile right there, which I think are the prettiest ones. They got that red face going on and that really striking blue tail, and they're just a cool animal. So another one of the what you call the toothy skinks that you can find out there, which is going to lead us to another short story, is the broad-headed skink, which is the most arboreal skink in Texas. Meaning that it's going to climb a lot as compared to other skinks. So we found a really large broad-headed skink up in a tree while we were in the pitcher plant trail, and this could have been so perfect, but it ended up not being as perfect as we wanted it to be. So there were no words exchanged. We saw this very large skink climbing up in a tree, and I had a 4-foot pair of snake tongs in my hand, and I briefly made eye contact with Romy, and we both knew what we were going to do. I was going to knock that skink out of that tree, and he was going to catch it. So I played my part pretty well. Admittedly, he had the harder part to play. So I knocked that skink out of the tree, and it fell like a perfect pass right into his open palms. And then it jetted out of his hands and got away, and we did not catch it. And we did not get a photo of it either. Actually, I think there is a photo of it, but I was unable to locate it. Anyway, we don't have a photo today of the broad-headed skink. And, I'll let Romy tell his side of that story if he wants to.
Well, I mean, I thought that this was a wonderful plan in concept, but in practice, it was just not, it wasn't very likely to. And so between Greg, the lizard, and I think I was the only one that was surprised that the lizard landed in my hands because it immediately landed and jetted. I was sitting there like, oh, I guess I should close my hand. Way too late. So yeah, it was a great capture. I couldn't believe it, and that was a lifer for both of us, right?
Yeah, we'll say that he briefly caught the skink. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we can agree on that. Me, you, and the lizard can all agree that it was briefly caught by you. Not caught in the sense that we actually captured it, but caught like in the air, caught.
Yeah. It was in my hand for a moment.
Yeah, so we don't have a picture of that. I wish I had a video of it, but we don't. We're gonna have to rectify some of these wishes. Another common lizard that we find out there when we're flipping under logs and things is the little brown skink, also known as the ground skink, a common name. There were a lot of them out there. They're pretty easy to find. Another common lizard that you can find all over East Texas, the green anole. And I think there is one more lizard out there that we did not catch. What is Cal's eye? Southwestern fence lizard? Southeastern fence? Which one is it?
Prairie lizard?
I think it's the fence. I think it's the fence swift, southwestern fence swift or something. It's Cal's eye.
It's the prairie lizard. The one in
Texas,
southwestern fence lizard.
Southwestern
rhinos.
Okay, so I think I've seen them out there, but we did not catch one. I know I used to catch them out there as a kid, but catching something as a kid and catching it as an adult, there can be a pretty steep curve to hold on to as you get a little bit older. As a 40-year-old man, I find myself having difficulty catching whiptails and fence lizards, where I can still catch green anoles. And that is all the lizards that we actually caught out there, as far as I remember. So moving into the longest section that we have is actually the snakes. But before we get to the snakes, there's not a reptile. Well, that's actually debatable in some circles, but this is a barred owl that flew right out over us in the road one day and landed up in a tree that we managed to get a photo of. So, we don't have to talk too much about that. I just wanted to throw that photo in there just so there's pictures of something besides a bunch of snakes and frogs and lizards. We did see a barred owl. We heard a lot of birds too. So, back to snakes. I know we've already showed a few snakes, but I got a little bit of a larger subsection of snakes that we haven't looked at yet. Just to go ahead and say before we even start, there are a few out there that we still want to catch. The timber rattlesnake being one, the pygmy rattlesnake being another, the red-bellied snake being one more. Can you think of any more?
That we have?
Yeah.
What was the question?
So I was saying that we haven't caught a red-bellied snake, we haven't caught a timber rattlesnake, and we hadn't caught a pygmy rattlesnake out there. I know there buttermilk racer obviously is one.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just failing to think of the other species. Some of them are pretty obscure.
I've been so honed in on pygmy and timber rattlesnake that I don't even really remember what other snakes there are out there. Let me pull out this 1938 field guide to the big thicket real quick.
Yeah, pull that bad boy out.
See what they got. A lot of names in here I won't recognize.
While you're doing that, I am going to share my screen and show a few of the snakes that we have got out there. Having some technical difficulties here.
John recommended, what about scarlet snake? I'm not sure if they're out there or not.
I don't know either.
That would be one I would jump up and do a ghost crab dance for.
Oh, yeah, me too. Oh, I'm sharing the screen already. Is that why I'm having such technical difficulty? Yeah, that's why I'm having such technical difficulty, because I'm already doing what I want to do.
Not that they're out there anymore, but pine snake would be a great.
Yeah, it'd be a hell of a find out there. So these are pretty common out there. That's the Decay's brown snake, Stororia DKI. So these guys are pretty common in my area down here too. I see a lot of them. Always a really cool snake to come across though, and looks very similar to a red-bellied snake. And I could have had a red-bellied snake in my hands out there in the big thicket before and didn't know it because I assumed it was a Decay's brown snake. Me and my son caught several when we were out there last time and did not bother to look closely at any of them to see if they were red-bellied snakes. So we need to clear that up, and we need to get us a red-bellied snake while we're out there. But this is a Decay's brown snake. This is a particularly beautiful young cottonmouth that we captured while we were out there. In my area in Galveston County, we have this gumbo soil. It's not red dirt like you have out in East Texas. So the ones down here are brown to black. This thing was just drop dead gorgeous. All the cottonmouths we catch in that area have that reddish look to them. But in particular, this was a juvenile. You can see by that yellow tail tip that all juvenile echistrodons share. This was a beautiful snake. And I got another photo here of Romy capturing that snake on camera. It doesn't look very safe, but he's, that's forced perspective. He's far enough away from that snake, I think. And he ain't been bit by a cottonmouth yet, just me. That was just a really pretty snake. It was actually the cover photo I intended to show today too, but did not. The photo he took from this perspective is a great photo. I'll show it before we get to the end. But so we've already looked at the western mud snake. That's the tan racer. Okay, the rough green snake. This photo actually wasn't taken in the big thicket because we never bothered to photograph the rough green snake we caught in the big thicket, which is actually in a terrarium behind me. We actually caught it on a road outside of the big thicket, a paved road going through the big thicket right there on the shoulder. And Romy locked him up and almost spun his truck around trying to stop for this snake. But this is not a picture of that snake. We did not photograph it. But these are a common snake out there. Best way to find them is going to be with a flashlight at night. Looking in trees. They stick out kind of like a sore thumb, just like this one's doing in this photo. The rough earth snake, we found some rough earth snakes out there. Me and my son found some, and I'm pretty sure I found some when I was there with Romy. Western ribbon snake, that photo was not taken in the thicket, but there's lots of western or Gulf Coast ribbon snakes or western ribbon snakes, whichever you want to call it. The Gulf Coast Proximus is Proximus is the western, and man, I am on the spot. I can't believe I forgot the subspecies name of the Gulf Coast ribbon snake. Orianus, I think that's it.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway, there's lots of them out there, and this is a photo of one on the preserve I work on. So Erin actually took this photo. I swiped this off of her INAT page. We did find some beautiful juvenile eastern copperheads. Note also that yellow tail tip that is visible on the juvenile echistrodons. Plain-bellied water snake, that's a little baby. He's got a long way to go to hit that 54.5 inch mark of the big boys we caught over at Ghost Road, but he might get there. Diamondback water snake, rhombifer, we caught this one. This one, I think that's somewhere in the evening time along the road there. We found a juvenile and photographed it. That's a young one, but they pretty much look the same their whole life. And that's it on the snake section that I have right now. So anything else that's out there we have yet to catch.
John offers the subspecies designation or the trinomial as is it Oarius? Oarius?
I was almost there.
Yep, you're almost there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I say it right.
So that is pretty much it on my slideshow, I think. But I do want to show that other photo, which was the cover screen for this episode. This is the photo that Romy was taking in that photo.
What's up? That classic cottonmouth echistrodon pose.
That was just a really pretty snake. I almost wish I had a nice East Texas cottonmouth in my collection. But hell, I don't need any more cottonmouths. I have two right now, and one of the two has bitten me. And we are just gonna not bring any more venomous snakes into my collection, unless they're coral snakes.
I remember getting into a couple of arguments about the identity of this particular snake because both copperheads and cottonmouths are in the same genus, Echistrodon, and they both kind of they look similar in some regards, particularly this snake. This cottonmouth does look similar to a copperhead. And there were folks that were debating us, and this is one of those things that we're pretty confident about the identification of this one. And it is but it's a very striking animal. It has kind of a copperhead type of look to it because of how red it is. And that's, I guess you see more of those in those substrates with red or kind of tannish dirts. But that's just a very striking animal. And there's a little differentiation. We won't dig into the details here on how to tell the two apart, but like just kind of the banding pattern on those. You got a jagged appearance to that cottonmouth, and then you'd have more of a smooth Hershey kiss type of appearance to the copperhead. So I know we're winding down here. See if there's anything else here in the chat. John helping us out with the trinomial. My cousin is, hey, what's up, Drew? Drew Turner, my cousin's in the house. He's asking, while I'm out in the marsh fishing, what snakes am I most likely to run into? That could be the topic of another podcast.
That just depends on the marsh you're in.
Yeah, we're discussing the big thicket of East Texas and the kind of the thickly wooded areas back along the coast. When Drew's fishing, he's fishing in Matagorda Bay. A lot of times he may be going down to North Padre to fish. So what is he seeing down there? I mean, in my experience, I know quite a few fishermen that have had rattlesnakes. Going through the estuarine marshes back there.
Nerodia clarki. It's probably going to be his number one culprit. That's Gulf Coast salt marsh snake. But yeah, the cottonmouths will also enter those brackish water marshes pretty commonly, and then you will definitely see rattlesnakes swimming in those brackish water marshes. A lot of people don't think rattlesnakes don't swim or don't swim well, but I can tell you firsthand that they actually do. One of the largest rattlesnakes I've ever caught, I chased into a salt marsh and caught him in knee deep water, and he was actually the only rattlesnake I've ever caught with a solid black rattle. Notable aberration.
Well, as we're winding this down, and while we may still have a few folks that are paying attention, I would ask that anybody that has a topic of interest that you would like us to dive into for the next version, the next episode of this. I think we're trying to work on a two-week rotation, and I think I can commit to that even if we come out of quarantine. So pop in some topics into the chat or comment after the fact if you think of something. We would love to have a little guidance from the folks that are interested in attending this. And I would say that we just did herps for the big thicket, and the priority when I'm out there is birds, and we could do another hour and a half on just birds, and much longer than that probably. We could do much longer on just the snakes and just the frogs. So this is a lot of fun for us, and I'm getting a couple of notes that it's an informative sort of podcast for other folks, and we love the way that this is. There's no script. There's a theme that just kind of keeps us on point for rants, but it's just a series of rants and sharing nice photographs that we've been able to accumulate. And we're always going to be, I believe, Greg and I both being naturalists, and we're both very herp heavy, reptiles and amphibians, but also bird heavy.
Yeah.
But we're not averse to bringing someone in like John that is like the guru of all and everything, in my opinion, one of the godfathers of Texas natural history.
I would like to say that I am very complimented that John has tuned in to our podcast here, and that he follows my podcast that I do as well, the Wild Wild West End. I'm very complimented by that, John. Just going to put that out into the public view, that I'm glad that's happening. And somebody else that I don't know if he's watching right now or watched any of this at all, or may go back and watch it later. I have a friend that is a longtime naturalist here in Galveston County. He's a British gentleman named Morton Bowler, and he has been watching my podcast. And I am extremely complimented by that Mort would pay that kind of mind to me, that he wants to listen to my material. So anyway, a couple of shout outs there to some big time naturalists that I'm glad are watching, and I definitely take input from them on anything I can.
I'm gonna I'm going to commit to getting a better camera for the next podcast. I have options, and I heard today that GoPro is actually going to do a firmware update so that you can just use the GoPro to do webcamming. It's kind of ridiculous that they didn't have that available, and they're about 2 months late. They're going to pat themselves on the back for being great supporters of the public through this firmware, but quite frankly, it's a little late. Anything else? I've got Drew, my cousin Drew, asked the question about the snakes in the coastal marshes. He said he affirms that yes, a rattlesnake once tried to get in my kayak with me.
So when that happens, I think they're just tired out from swimming. Sometimes they get out there in that water and they're swimming around for a long time, and I think that they consider your kayak a freaking log or something because they're not wanting to get close to you. That's 100%. Rattlesnakes don't like to be around people. I mean, so they don't like to be around anything else larger than them so much that they evolved a tail appendage, which no other snake has done that makes noise. Well, other snakes have evolved tail appendages, to be clear, like the spider tail viper, but not many. And the rattlesnake is the absolute master of telling you, get away from me. So they don't want to be near you. So while they're climbing on your kayak kind of as an accident or an opportunity to get out of the water.
We also see well-established populations on these dredge spoil created islands out in the bays. So in the line of work that I'm involved with bird habitat stewardship, monitoring, and management, you'll have these islands in the middle of bay and estuarine systems that could be miles from the mainland in some cases, that were created through the maintenance or creation of shipping channels. So they take that material that they dredged out and they dump it over here, and it creates an island, and the birds come and utilize it. But we found some of these islands will have great densities of rattlesnakes. So obviously they're cruising around in the bays and marshes regularly enough that they're finding successful opportunities to mate and create lots of progeny. We got another note here, Cargis, and he says he saw a hognose in Matagorda Bay.
Interesting.
Matagorda Bay swimming around, or was that Mesquite Bay next to Matagorda Island, and he said the hognose saw the boat as safety and something to crawl upon, just like Greg described. And I think that gets us up to date on the chat, and we should probably wind this one down.
Yeah, we've been running a long time on this one, longer than I thought we would. But I chalk it up to Ghost Road. We got way off into the Ghost Road talk. Start talking about ghosts and swamp games. But that's
go check it out, Saratoga, Texas.
Yeah, definitely check it out. But anyway, we have come to the end of the time to spend with you tonight, folks. This has been the Modern Texas Naturalist meets the Wild Wild West End. I'm Greg Hall. He is Romy Swanson. We are your co-hosts, and we've enjoyed talking to all of you tonight, and we've enjoyed your questions. And please do, as Romy said, and give us some other topics to talk about. Otherwise, we're just going to have to keep telling stories about all the stuff we've done, which we don't mind doing, to be clear. And we got a lot more. So we didn't even cover all the big thicket stories tonight. We could sequel this and keep going about the big thicket. We wouldn't have a bunch of pretty pictures, but we could still keep telling stories. So anyway, this is the end, my friends. Everybody have a nice night.
See y'all in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.